is your name and your title?
My name is Mike Longoria, Longoria. I work for the Center for Language, Regional Expertise and Culture in Pensacola, Florida. I'm the CENTCOM, or Middle East Regional Desk Officer.
Okay. Cultural training, it's important, especially for today's Navy. Could you explain how and why that is?
Cultural training for the Navy today is critically important. The major reasons for the cultural training and the requirements is because the Navy is everywhere, as opposed to the Marine Corps and the Army who are...
I have to stop you. Okay.
Okay.
All right, we can pick up from your first question, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking about cultural training for the Navy and specifically today's Navy, and why and how is that so important?
Cultural training for today's Navy is critically important. One of the biggest reasons is because the Army and the Marine Corps are focused, rightly so, on Iraq and Afghanistan. The Navy is going there, but the Navy continues to deploy everywhere else in the region. We have examples like Africa Partnership Station, 1,000 ship Navy, the Americas, many different programs that the Navy focuses on throughout the world. So cultural awareness training throughout the world is critically important for the Navy, not just Iraq and Afghanistan, but basically everywhere else. Whether it's a tsunami in Banda Aceh, an earthquake in Pakistan, or an earthquake in Afghanistan, we're going to go and we're going to assist. Cultural awareness is critically important for the Navy.
How would you describe cultural awareness training to somebody who's not familiar with it?
Cultural awareness training to someone who's not familiar with it, basically what we will provide or we will coordinate for is the ability for someone to come and provide do's and don'ts, language familiarization, a culture's beliefs, values, and norms. Basically get into the understanding of a culture wherever you happen to be going. In my case, it would be anywhere in the Middle East. Well, like I said before, we cover the rest of the world. You'll get a basic understanding of the culture before you deploy, and it give you a comfortable, better feeling and understanding the region, understanding the area.
What one specific example could you give me of information that would be useful to somebody to help them to do their job better by understanding cultural awareness?
Information to help you do your job better in understanding cultural awareness. The examples that I get from the people that I present to, for example, is how to meet someone, the correct way to meet someone in the Middle East, the way to establish a rapport to gain their trust, to gain people's trust so that they can assist you, maybe in force protection, maybe in the ability to construct something, to build something with them. But the biggest deal is in understanding cultural awareness, you have that ability to establish a rapport with them. Critically important, no matter where we go, whether it's the Middle East or whether it's Asia, it does not matter. The ability to establish a rapport with the host country.
This may be a little bit repetitive, but we'll do it. What void is there that needs to be filled by training people in cultural awareness?
Currently, from what I've seen in the training before, there is a huge void in the requirement for cultural awareness training needs. One of the things that we see that we send Navy personnel to is what's called regional training. Regional training is not really cultural training. Regional training is discussing items within a region, say like the Middle East, and you're discussing oil output or types of government. There is a real requirement for cultural awareness training, the beliefs, values, and behaviors of a people, the do's and don'ts, social etiquette, things like that, what we provide, as opposed to regional training. There's a huge void. Every time I train, I usually get the comment that, why haven't we had this before? Or I wish I would have had this kind of training during deployment, during my last at-sea deployment. I get a lot of comments like that. So this type of training we provide fills that void for cultural awareness training.
Okay, and this is going to be repetitive again, but let's address the type of responses when you give a seminar, for example.
Mm-hmm.
What do you hear from people that you've just spoken with?
Actually, when I give a seminar, a presentation, they're not classes, they're presentations, and I provide information on the culture. A good thing is some of the people have already been deployed, so the information I provide reinforces the information they have. The new people will ask questions like, why do women have to wear burqas? Or what's the deal with the veil? Discuss honor killings. I'll get those kinds of questions. How should I act when I meet a female? Those are the kinds of questions that I get.
Good now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No noise, right?
No,
we're
nice,
all
thank you.
set. Thank you. So we'll just try that last one again.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, we've So when you do your seminars and you speak with the participants afterwards, what kind of response from them are you hearing?
The response, when I do the seminars and the response that I get from the people that are in the presentation, the responses that I get for them is, why didn't I have this? I would love to have this training before. Now I understand about Islam. I have a better understanding about Islam. I have a better understanding about the culture, how women are treated, how to meet and greet, how to establish friendships. Those are the kinds of comments and information that I get back, and they make me feel good in understanding that.
For people who have not been deployed, what sorts of questions do they ask you that they think they should know, that they may have heard about and they think that they should know more about?
People that have not been deployed, they're worried more, they want to pinpoint on the do's and don'ts. What are the do's and don'ts of specific countries? In my case, the Middle East, I'll talk to them about, shaking hands, or about the bottom of the soles of the feet, interrupting people during prayer. They're more interested in the basic do's and don'ts. Later on, if I have a little bit longer class, then we can get to values, beliefs, behaviors, and norms of a culture. But for the young people, the new people, I should say, never been deployed before, they want to know what's going to hit them right there, the do's and don'ts aspects of that, meeting and greeting etiquette, basically.
Before we got interrupted, you were talking about some of the questions that you were faced with. Why do women wear burqas? How do I look at women? Could you go over that again, please?
Sure. Some of the questions that I get asked a lot in these presentations and that we try to answer successfully are things that they see. What does it say in the Quran about women wearing burqas? Why do women have to wear veils and burqas? Why is there such things as honor killings? What's the difference between Christianity and Islam? What's the difference between the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran? Those are a lot of the kinds of questions that I get asked in the presentations. And the presentations are intended to help answer those questions, just to give them a basic understanding of that information.
Okay, and then lastly, I think if we can just do a summary, if you want to just if we need a 30-second soundbite of the big picture, why it's necessary, and what it
Okay.
helps to happen.
Cultural awareness training for Navy personnel is critically important, because cultural awareness training may not only save lives, hopefully it does, but it improves the lives of the people that are going next. If we understand culture, if you understand culture when you deploy, you create a situation, you create rapport and a situation that allows you to build relationships, allows you to get jobs done, whatever you need to do, no matter where you're at in the Middle East. But when you leave, you've established that relationship, the new group that comes in, it'll then be a better working environment for them. It'll be helpful for them. So not only saving lives, but also accomplishing your mission in the Middle East and anywhere where cleric trains, where we train. In my case, it happens to be the Middle East. That it?
That's it?
Hey,
Cool.
don't want to.
Okay, great. Brian, if you could please give your rank and name and spell your name, please.
I sure will. Let me turn this off so I don't get some sort of obnoxious phone ring in the middle of.
Idea?
Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. Lieutenant Commander Brian Morgan with Maritime Civil Affairs Group. That's spelled BRIAN MORGAN. I'm a lieutenant commander.
Pass that test. So, where were you deployed and how long have you been back?
I was deployed to Afghanistan, the Provincial Reconstruction Team in Gardez, which is in the southeastern section of Afghanistan, about 40 miles away from the Pakistan border.
And how long have you been back?
I've been back about 5 weeks now.
Great. Since everything is relatively fresh in your mind, we'd like to pick it.
Indeed.
And were there situations that you were in that at the time you just had a feeling that you were not correctly expressing what you needed to get across, and how might you use that experience to talk to people who have not yet been over?
I was fortunate that in my position as Civil Affairs team leader, I had access to an interpreter, and I had one with me at all times. But there were occasions where I understood that I was out of my element speaking the technical jargon, or not understanding village organization. And so if that's one thing I could do better, would be to understand the tribal organization in the area that I was working in. Get a better understanding of the tribal organization sooner.
What is your take on relationship building and how that can work best?
Oh, as far as relationships are concerned, it was absolutely crucial to what I was developing. I was looking to build the human terrain map, finding out who was the influential persons in my area of operations. So the relationships was everything with me. I really didn't have a product to sell them or something to build. I needed to get information, and so relationships was everything, because that's the only thing that's going to beget good conversation and good information.
How does one go about relationship building?
Well, I found early on to develop good relationships, I had to respect their culture. I had to remember that I was the visiting team and they were the home team. So one of the things I try to do is be very observant. I would also ask my interpreters or cultural advisors, what are some habits that I'm doing? What do you see in my behavior that is probably incorrect or maybe stepping on toes? And I would learn from that. Some specific examples of learning cultural attributes of Afghanistan is introductions. Introductions are huge, both what you're saying and some of your gestures.
Could you talk a little bit more specifically about introductions and what helps you to be more successful and what works against you being successful?
Sure. Concerning introductions again,
Not again, you can't say again. It's concerning introductions.
concerning introductions, I found that working in third world countries or underdeveloped countries, I should say, that's really all they had with a relationship. So starting that relationship off with a good introduction was key. Handshakes in Afghanistan, it would start off with a handshake and typically mentioning salam alaikum if you were the first to mention hello, which is their way of saying hello, and then wa alaikum assalam if you were responding to someone's salam alaikum. And then it might graduate to something like a hand on the right shoulder of some sort. Or if you were further along in a relationship, you could start your hello with a hug or some sort of bear hug, a pat on the back of some sort. So I found those to be critical. So that's what I tried to start with. Bottom line is, for introductions, I just kind of observed what they were doing and followed their lead.
Can I stop for 1 second? Somebody's cell phone. Okay. And we're back. Go ahead.
Okay, talk about the introductions.
Oh, introductions, I think, are key to starting the relationships and continuing the relationships. I typically followed their lead. When I was meeting individuals, typically several at a time, for the first time, I found that they were reluctant to start the hellos. So I would start that with the simple salam alaikum. And once they understood that I was at least making an attempt to learn their language and use it, then they tend to warm up a little bit. Of course, I would shake their hand, which is almost customary, universal introduction, is shaking a hand. But then I would also use, once I'd shaken their hand, then I would put my hand over my heart while I was saying salam alaikum or wa alaikum assalam if I was responding to their introduction. And then I would even put that right hand up on their right shoulder. And that's something that I had observed from the locals as a technique that they used. And even the elders had subtle differences in the way they said hello to each other. And if I was meeting an elder, I tried to adopt some of that without trying to patronize them. I wanted it to be sincere, so I practiced it so that it was sincere.
Great. I think we've got that section covered, and you want to talk a little bit about the value of the training itself. When Tim said you have experience that the others won't, I'm not...
What he's saying is just my tactical experience,
Okay.
and not so much the training. Most of my training, there was fundamental training at Fort Dix and Fort Bragg, but most of the stuff that I employed, I observed and I learned. So
Okay.
I can if you have some.
If you given your experiences and what you were able to learn for yourself in the field, how could you express that to people who have not been before and say, if you're going to remember 3 things, you might think about these 3?
Concerning culture and language, if there's 3 things that I'm really going to knuckle down and learn, I'm going to try and learn the introductory phrases. And I'm going to learn them well and try and get the dialect down just as best as I possibly can. Introductions and even salutations as well. Next, I'm going to try and learn if there's any specific gestures, introductory gestures and departing gestures that I can also practice. And then thirdly, just to be observant, to watch what your audience is doing and take it down one notch on your volume until you get good, till you get proficient, until you get sincere about what you're observing, and then you can integrate that into your mechanisms of introduction and interaction.
You made a comment earlier today in the session about being patient and taking it slow. Could you address that a little bit?
Right. As military, we're typically sent into an area of operations to take care of a mission, to execute a mission, which typically almost always has a timeline associated to it. And we think in those terms. There's an old, I think it's Pashtun Wali slogan, and that is, "You have a watch, but I have the time." And that's exactly what occurs in the Middle East and in other areas. Try not to be in a hurry, because you're just going to irritate others who do not understand or won't understand that they won't believe that you've got their interest at heart if you're always in a hurry. So you've just got to take your time, be patient, understand the introductions, make thorough introductions yourself, and then you'll find that what normally takes 8 or 9 meetings, a level of trust to establish, you can get accomplished in maybe a meeting and a half, maybe 2 meetings. You can get to a level of trust between each other to where now you can get very good work done, very good information exchange, and it just takes patience.
Michael and Gloria made a very interesting statement about not only is the training essential to help save lives and improve the quality of work there, but for the next generation of troops going over, it helps to make a path for them, which I thought was a really interesting observation. It begins the process of creating communication. Do you, when you were there, did you have any thoughts about, well, now I've been able to teach people what we're like? I guess if you could wrap your brain around what they're thinking about you now that you've made this effort, how do you think it impacted them and their treatment of you?
As far as our impact and influence on the areas that we visit, every soldier, every sailor is an ambassador to the military and therefore the United States. So that image that we present, it needs to be sincere, and it in the past has been offensive at times. We need to prevent that. And that's why cultural education is so important, is to prevent cultural faux pas or mistakes. And I think we're getting there. More training is required, and it needs to be thorough and across the board. Even the lowest sailor or soldier can be your strategic sailor or soldier when they make a large mistake that gets headline news because they've made some sort of mistake. So it starts from the bottom and can go all the way to the top as far as the importance of culture. I'd like to think that the people that we influence are not only the people that we discuss, the mature audience that we work with in our remote regions, but also the generation that is 3, 5, and 7 years old that's watching the American influence, and hopefully we can influence them to let them know, we're here to help. And so when they grow up, and when it's year 2025, that generation also respects American forces.
We'll follow through to the end in terms of what you came to realize is significant.
Yes. And what was the question? Gotcha. I'm just kidding, Tim. That's hilarious. That's good.
You didn't get me.
What we find is that all of us will observe some sort of immersion in culture or a situation that might make us uncomfortable because we haven't seen it before. An example of that might be hand-holding, a man holding another man's hand. This is common in Middle Eastern countries, in Islamic culture and Afghanistan cultures, as I witnessed. I would witness sometimes men holding hands, or if I was meeting with a village elder and we were walking through his village, he might reach down and grab my hand. That's actually a terrific symbol of friendship and trust. And it goes deeper than just him telling me that he trusts me. Because he's the village leader, he is also telling everyone in his village, not only does he trust me, but he wants the villagers to trust me. And if I've done my introductions of my crew, my security force, properly to him, he also trusts me and my crew. That goes one step further. Because he's holding my hand, he wants everyone in his village to trust me and my crew. This is when we start to get alliances. This is when we start to understand and get information that's helpful for both the local nationals and ourselves as well, because there are environments that we work in that are sometimes hostile. We may find that we're the recipient of unsolicited information. Information gets volunteered to our soldiers that's going to help protect us and help protect the local nationals. And this is all based off of one simple observation, and that is the village elder holding my hand, which transmits itself all the way down the line in the village to, you need to trust this man and all the men that he leads. And they helped us out quite a bit. Tim, how'd we do on that?
That's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about an anecdote? Do you have a funny story, something you saw, or that
No, you were telling
spooked you, or?
Ed some stories, and Ed was saying, hold that for the camera? Is that,
Yeah.
Is that the, yeah.
Yeah, so just
Okay.
in a more relaxed fashion.
Let me see how to word this. You know, as far as being uncomfortable in situations, I think the times that I was most uncomfortable is when I was conducting a meeting or a shura, or arriving at a meeting and a shura, and I knew that I was short on time and could not stay long. I knew right off from the start that I was going to have to explain why I could not stay for 3 hours. So I would make strong attempts to explain just that, because I knew they were going to offer tea. I knew they were going to offer some sort of small meal to eat. And if time didn't permit, I went well out of my way to explain why I had to get to business, because they had known me up until that point, and normally I did entertain tea and small chatter, small talk, and to not do that, I knew didn't make them uncomfortable, but they were disappointed, to say the least, because I enjoyed their hospitality, and I think they enjoyed my company as well. They had befriended me and vice versa. So that was the most discomfort I would typically find, was having to say, I wish I could stay long, or maybe having to refuse tea, or say, I wish I could, but I don't have the time. Otherwise, from a cultural standpoint, I don't recall ever, don't remember putting myself into a culturally embarrassing situation. I worked very diligently at trying to observe what the Romans are doing in Rome, so to speak, and I followed that lead. Later, if I saw something that I wanted to learn, or ask about, or inquire, then I would talk to my interpreter or some sort of local national and say, can you explain this to me? He did this, that, or the other. Is that something that I can do and incorporate into my gestures? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be good. For an example, concerning language, astute attention to detail to dialects is great. We've all dealt with people who might speak or struggle with English as a second language, and it's difficult to understand. But we do recognize when someone who does speak English as a second language speaks very good English. That's easy to recognize. Wow, English is their second language, but they speak it so well. I know that that's a universal value, so if I could try and speak Pashto accurately, at least the introductory and salutations, that's a great big attention getter. So the funny syllables, I would work on those. Even the elders, the response to salam alaikum is wa alaikum assalam. But I noticed the elders would say wa alaikum assalam. They would drag that woo out. So I consulted my interpreter. Is that something that I can do when I'm talking to an elder? Absolutely, and you're going to see that it gets his attention, and he's going to appreciate it. And so that's what I did. So again, within 2 meetings, I'm getting big bear hugs as introductions instead of the typical standoffish handshake, which just took 8 or so meetings to get that much further along. And I think it's because of the attention to detail when I was introducing myself and saying hello.
Was there ever a time when you said to yourself, later I'm really going to laugh about this?
Not being able to identify what I was about to put in my mouth. It was wrapped up in a,
Okay. We have to give the...
Oh, yeah, I have to get the preface on that. Yeah, okay. Something funny that I'll laugh at. Okay. Oh, goodness sakes. Something that was funny that I'll never forget. Frequently, I was invited to enjoy dinner, lunch, some sort of eating hospitality. And by and large, I could identify most of what I was eating. It was probably rice or potatoes or something. But when the tray showed up and I couldn't identify what I was going to eat, I tried not to disclose that I didn't know what it was, and I ate it, and I was wondering, boy, I wonder if I'm going to feel the effects of that. And of course, it's an underdeveloped country, so if they serve you a cup of tea that has 3 flies floating in it, well, you drink the cup of tea with flies floating in it. You don't make a big deal of trying to pick the flies out. You just drink the tea. So those are some things that I can indeed remember. Other things that aren't so funny that I still remember that's universal as far as customs is children. Children everywhere love to respond to adults, especially if they're giving candy or trinkets or just any sort of toy. So children are a great mechanism to interface between adults, and yourself and the local host nationals. Keep going. More questions. Keep going, Tim, because I've got so much in here. And
Too long, but anything that you heard
Yeah.
about, someone told you before you went over that you found out that was all wrong? And you don't have to make one up.
yeah.
If you have one, fine. If not, or a story about something anybody else did that you think might be instructive or humorous.
As far as the American posture is concerned, we Americans are typically used to kind of stomping into a room, and if there's a meeting to be had, by golly, let's get this meeting started, and I'm running this meeting, and let's stay on an agenda. It kind of points back to the let's be patient. We're still a visiting team on their turf, and granted, we're probably there for a reason, maybe to start reconstruction projects or to coordinate operations, but we're still on their turf. So let's try and respect their way of doing business, and if it means drinking 3 cups of tea first, let's do that. Otherwise, you're going to take a lot longer to get those plans squared away than if you just had some patience and got through the introductions and some small talk.
You know what, I think we
We covered that one before.
covered it
Absolutely.
already with
Absolutely.
the higher energy level,
Right.
and I think we're getting to the bottom of your well.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No.
All right, I'm going to try and think of any other episodes.
Can you talk about specific gestures, like things in Afghanistan that
Sure,
have to get reversed?
sure.
But beyond that, I mean, we know the hand over the heart, but anything else that comes to mind that we might not think about?
Let me try and put something forward there. Along with the introductions, we've discussed the gestures, the hand over the heart, the articulation of their language accurately, but just a tilt of the head, attention, sincere attention without glaring them out of the room. It's all pretty much a universal value of just paying attention to somebody is something that's well received, and not interrupting conversation is another big element over there that they value. Letting someone say what they need to say before interrupting. Yeah, that's about all I've got.
I think so
Okay.
too.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay.
Also, there are dates, just
Right.
say a number of weeks ago,
Mhm.
so it's not timed. Okay. And then basically, I'll be asking you, what experiences did you have that you thought went pretty well, and what didn't go so well, and
Okay.
what advice would you have for? Okay.
Sure.
And
Well-
any anecdotes that you have about, that was kind of funny. It wasn't at the time, but you're. Ooh. Okay.
BDU is pretty noisy fabric,
Right.
so if you can try not to gesture
To
so
move,
much with
yep.
your hands.
I'm Italian though, so I'll do the best I can.
I hear you. I hear you.
And time code, please.
It is 4:41:55, and we're rolling.
Okay, if you could just spell your name and your rank, please.
Sure. My name is Lieutenant Christopher, Christopher, Servello, Servello.
So, you have returned from where, and where did you return?
Sure. I have been back for about
If you could,
right.
the shore.
Yep.
Yep.
I've been back for about 6 months. My team and I deployed to West and Central Africa as part of Africa Partnership Station.
Great. Now, in your experiences there, what did you experience, and you knew at the time that you were not reflecting what you wanted to reflect to the person that you were talking to. and you could just sense that something was not quite going wrong? Under what circumstances would that happen?
I think probably the biggest thing that we noticed right off the bat was the difference between the American idea of business, and kind of the African idea of let's become friends, let's build a relationship first, and then do business. So when I would go into situations, I kind of had to leave my American way of doing business at the door and embrace the local way of discussing and working together.
How did you make that adjustment?
Candidly, it took me a little while to adjust. I found myself conducting bad meeting after bad meeting, and I would kind of regroup at the end of the day and figure out what went wrong and why I'd made no progress. And I realized that it was my American way of thinking that was causing me to have problems.
How would people react when you weren't behaving as though they would want you to behave?
The Africans are very polite people, and they understand what kind of mindset Americans come in with. So they were very patient, but I couldn't really break through. It took me making the change before I started to see a real difference in how we were able to conduct business together.
Your answers are very short. You barely give me time to think.
Sorry.
Explain how you talk about relationship building, and how does the building of that relationship and the achievement of that relationship help you to do your job better?
Sure. What we're in the business of doing civil affairs, so the relationship that I, as the civil affairs team leader, have with the host nation is very important. And if I am to conduct business, before I can do that, I need to build a relationship and almost make a friendship so that they trust me. And without that trust, it's very hard to move forward. So the more trust we have, the more of a partnership, the better outcomes we're able to achieve.
You talked about having a very business outlook at first. What are some other examples of how, through cultural awareness, you were able to understand how to behave in other ways?
I think the biggest thing that I learned from the cultural awareness training that I received was to have an open mind, to not go in with any preconceived notions, and to learn from the people that I was meeting with on a day-to-day basis. I understood their cultural norms and kind of the way they thought, but I didn't let that jade the way I thought. I really was interested in learning from the person that I met with on a daily basis.
Were there times that you felt particularly uncomfortable with the cultural differences?
As Americans, space is a very big deal to us. We don't like people to invade our personal space. And I found from either living in Europe and deploying to West and Central Africa that space is not so much important to those people. So as groups would crowd around me and touch me, I wasn't really used to that. So that made me a little uncomfortable. But the more I was there and the more I got used to the situation, the better I felt.
Were there any behaviors that you had that you could just tell, ooh, that was wrong?
I probably have a bad habit of interrupting. So the protocols in which meetings are conducted are almost, they're very scripted. So you have to respect that when you go to meet someone, that it's their turn to talk and it's not yours. So my sometimes enthusiasm to conduct business in a very business-like American way would sometimes get me in trouble. I got over it, but it kept me slow at the beginning.
Now, do you want to talk about language at all, and phrases and things that would be, what are the most helpful things for somebody new going into the field to know about what phrases they should use, shouldn't use, that sort of thing?
The first several times that I deployed to West and Central Africa, I had very little language. And I found that it cost me, and not just in my ability to order food or my ability to conduct business, but it cost me in my ability to build partnerships and build relationships. The more just small phrases that I learned, simple things like ordering a beer or ordering a pizza in the host country's language, really did get people to open up to me. And then from that opening up, they shared information, and I found that I was learning more, and as a result of that learning, I was actually getting more done. So I would encourage folks to just, even if it's just one or two phrases, really capitalize on anything that you can get before you deploy, so that you can be more effective when you're on deployment. Was that too long for you?
No,
Okay.
give some examples in the foreign language of some of the,
Okay.
Okay, it's like, say, I found it I found it so helpful to be able to order a beer and then by saying,
I don't remember
or
my-
a phrase that you can remember, just so that
Okay.
the viewer, they're kind of playing this video game, and
Sure.
it would be helpful for them to see somebody that they can relate to doing what they're trying to do,
Sure.
learning to do.
Sure. Even the simple phrase of "Good morning, how are you?" Bonjour, comment allez-vous? Goes a long way when you're in a hotel or a restaurant to really brighten up and make the host nation people feel warm and feel that you're at least making an effort to try to learn their way of life.
Now, if you come away from this experience, and if you were talking to somebody who's about to be deployed, and they said, okay, what are 3 things you want to tell me that I really, really, really need to know? What might you say?
I think if I was going to give 3 things that I think people should know before they deploy to a new area, I would recommend that they keep an open mind. I would recommend that they learn as much as they can about the local culture and the local language that they're going to experience. And I would encourage them to have fun while they're there and to learn from the people that they're meeting. It doesn't all have to be business. Kind of forget that American way of doing things and have a good time when you're out there.
Any humorous anecdotes you want to tell?
Okay. I'll share one kind of humorous story. I traveled with a very senior officer down to West Africa. This senior officer was very businesslike and always liked to do things. He was a very professional man, but so we went in and we met with a French-speaking general, and before the African general could even begin to welcome the admiral burst out while he was there, immediately took over the meeting. There was an awkward pause and a long silence, and the general very politely, though, explained to the admiral that this was his office, this was his country, and that if the admiral wished to do business with the general, that he would let the general speak first. The admiral has met with him now several times afterwards, and it's a source of good humor. But it was very awkward, and it made me wish that the admiral had read the cultural brief prior to going to the meeting.
That's when you want to do the backstroke. Perfect.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you. First, I wondered, do you remember any idioms or phrases that were unique to where you were that you would want to share? Oftentimes when you go to these places, you'll find that things aren't in translation books that you learn when you're there that could help build rapport with people. I mean, nice things, not slang or bad, negative things. Nice things.
It's not so much an idiom. I would. The handshake in West and Central Africa is very big. So
Why don't you describe how?
sure, it's very similar to.
Let's start. Okay, describe how
Sure.
the handshake is important.
When in West and Central Africa, shaking hands with locals is very important, and it's not a typical handshake. It's somewhere in between giving someone 5 and shaking hands, and it's very rhythmic. Most people will do it, so I would encourage you to learn that handshake right off the bat because it'll let people know that you're interested in their culture and you're very friendly. I don't really have idiom. I'm trying to think.
Like phrases.
Yeah, I'm
like that.
I'm drawing a blank.
That's okay. You can ask another time.
Yeah.
Oh, really got him to speak in French. Give it
Yeah.
a break.
And then I wanted to know too, like you mentioned that one story with the commander, and the person that made the mistake was able to kind of save
Mhm.
himself. Can you think of any other stories where like something maybe went wrong, but you were able to remediate and maybe solve a problem because you realized that you had made a mistake?
Sure. Refresh when you visit for the first time with either peers or with senior leaders in West and Central Africa. It's very common for them to offer you something to drink or something to eat. the first or second time that I visited down there, really just out of politeness, we thought that it was okay to refuse. We didn't want to take their soda or their beer, actually, is what they offered us, beer in the middle of the day. You know, we didn't think it was appropriate. When we refused it, it became obvious to us that the tone of the meeting had shifted, that they weren't as receptive to what we were saying. They almost felt offended. Kind of through some nonverbal communication, we all decided, okay, we'll have that beer and we'll have that soda now. After a few sips, the room seemed to be hospitable again. We seemed to let them know that we were interested in working with them, and the meeting continued on, and we had a positive outcome. So just kind of remember to really accept that hospitality when it's offered to you.
Nicely put.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
And then the other question I had was gender. I don't think we've covered gender in your interview yet, nor did we do it in the others, but that's okay. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your experience as a male there in Africa, dealing with either women that were stationed there with you or women that were there in Africa before, like what things you had to learn or adjust to that we may not think about here.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of how to put it. Okay. Gender issues in West and Central Africa, they're not as restrictive, perhaps, as we've learned maybe in the Middle East, but it is something that, as an American, that you need to be cognizant of. You certainly don't want to act towards whether it be female officers or females that you would encounter in your professional dealings the same way that you would in the United States. There isn't that general level of familiarity, so you just need to be cognizant of the different male-female issues. If you have questions, I would encourage you to ask either someone that has been there longer at the embassy or in the host nation, but it's something that it's an easy thing that you don't want to make a mistake with. So just I would encourage you to learn about those male-female issues.
Could you give an example, a specific example of what one of those issues might occur?
Sure. A male and female issue that you just may want to know prior to going there. It's not appropriate for a male and female to conduct business in a room by themselves. So if you're a female and you're going to meet with a male senior officer, don't be surprised if they ask someone to sit in the meeting with you, really just to make sure that the two of you aren't alone. Or vice versa. If you're going to see a female senior, just make sure that you bring someone of the female sex to sit in there with you so that it's not awkward. Can I just mention one more thing? I would say about clothing, because I think that's a big thing. One other thing that one thing that you would want to remember when you go to West and Central Africa is typical American clothing doesn't normally fit in. Certainly, shorts are a taboo. Regardless of the heat, you want to make sure that you dress more conservative. I'm sorry, that's me. I thought I put it on mute.
Oh, and when we redo that.
Yeah.
Wow, it was $50 too.
Right.
Could you say whether you're talking about dress for men and women?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll just turn this off. Sorry, I thought I had it on mute.
It's the American way?
Right. My bad. When traveling to West and Central Africa, your attire is something that you'll want to consider. Both for male and females, you'll want to make sure that you dress a little bit more conservatively. Regardless of the heat, shorts and short skirts are never acceptable. For women, anything that would expose your midriff or a large amount of your arms is not acceptable. So just make sure that you show the consideration to your hosts that they deserve when thinking what to wear, both in a professional setting and on liberty.
Can I ask you about food?
Sure.
What kinds of foods are common in the area where you were?
Okay. I've said that like 3 or 4 times. Fish is a large part of West and Central African diet. It's not uncommon to have fish at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it's something that you should consider. If you're not a big fish fan, you might want to think about changing your dietary habits. I will say that I found it to be very good. You'll try things that you've never tried before. Every country that you go to, they will have a kind of a local dish that's a little different. I would encourage people to try it. If not, just to be polite. If you don't like it, just kind of get through it and don't order seconds. But when you show locals that you're interested in their food and in their culture, it really does go a long way to building partnerships.
We've got a lot of good sound bites in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
This is good.